All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Is the volume on this mic okay? Higher, lower? Good? Okay, thank you. Well, welcome everyone, and thank you for coming to this candidate forum sponsored by the Sanders County Ledger. I'm Ledger publisher Annie Wooden, and I'm very excited to give you this opportunity to get to know your local candidates. So if you'd all rise, we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So along with the forums tonight and tomorrow night, we also have a very full paper this week. It features, the Ledger this week features additional questions and answers than what you'll hear tonight and tomorrow night, and a little bit more about the candidates, so make sure you pick up a Ledger this week. Tonight, we will hear from state representative candidates, county attorney candidates, coroner, and sheriff candidates. And then I hope you can join us again tomorrow when we'll hear from justice of the peace candidates, clerk and recorder, treasurer, superintendent of school candidates, and candidates for our 2 commissioner openings. And then also following the forum, candidates will stick around and you're welcome to ask them questions and visit with them individually. We also have tables out in the lobby with some pamphlets and information about candidates. So I hope that everyone will use this time when you have the candidates as a captive audience to ask your questions. So here's how this evening will work. I will ask each set of candidates up to this stage. Candidates will have 2 minutes for an opening statement, and then 2 minutes to respond to each question. Following the questions, each candidate will have 2 minutes for closing statements. We will rotate who answers first, and I will ring this bell when the candidates have 15 seconds left. I think everybody's used to that from the primary. When his or her 2 minutes are up, then the microphone will shut off and we'll move on to the next candidate. And then just as a reminder to the candidates, I ask that your answer is focused on the question asked. If a candidate strays from the topic, I will shut off the microphone and move on to the next candidate. And just as a reminder, I ask that you be respectful and talk about your experience, ideas, and qualifications, and not about other people. This is a chance for the voters to get to know you. All right, so we will get started with our first race. I'm going to ask the state representative candidates up. In House District 13, we have Colleen Hines and Paul Fielder. And for House District 14, we have Denley Logie running unopposed. So if you would sit down in that order, please. So we'll start with introductions, and Mr. Fielder, if you'd like to go first, you have 2 minutes.
I'm Paul Fielder, the Republican candidate for Montana House of Representatives. I'm running for re-election to represent House District 13, which includes Western Sanders County. My wife Jennifer and I live on the south side of the river from Thompson Falls. I've got a son and a daughter, and have 5 grandchildren. I earned a bachelor's and master's degrees in fish and wildlife biology and spent 31 years as a fish and wildlife biologist in the Northwest. I was first elected to the House of Representatives in 2020 with 71% of the votes in a 3-party race. I've been chairman of the Sanders County Republican Central Committee since 1975. I represent 8 counties in the Montana Republican Party Executive Board, where I also serve on the Rules Committee of that group. I'm on the Rules Committee because I pay attention to details. I served as a member, chairman, president, or director of many sports and scientific organizations. I've usually ended up in a leadership role within these groups that I work in. I'm in my 7th year as an election judge in Sanders County because I'm concerned about our election integrity. My background in natural resources makes me the best candidate to represent Western Montana because of our fish and wildlife, our forests, our mineral, and our water resources here. During the 2021 legislative session, I served on the House Fish and Wildlife Committee, Natural Resources and Taxation Committees, and the Environmental Quality Council. During that work, I was able to sponsor 8 bills that were passed into law. Many other legislators followed my lead on natural resources issues and election issues. Actions speak louder than words. If you look at the listings that I left out in the front of the organizations that endorsed me, the awards that I've earned in the legislature, and my scorecard ratings, you'll see that I'm the most effective candidate for this position. Thank you.
Hello, and good evening. I would like to start off with a really big thank you to each and every one of you for showing up tonight at the Rex and being a part of the democratic process. Your right to vote is your right. Your vote is your voice. Your vote is your choice. And every vote counts. So I am really thankful that you're all here to be a part of democracy. My name is Colleen Hines, and I'm running for the House Representative for House District 13. I live in Heron, Montana. I've lived there for about 50 years. And when I first got there, it was pretty primitive and rough. And at the end of the day, when you could sit down and look at the mountains and look at Montana's blue sky and give thanks for the peace of place, was the reward that was immeasurable. And the community and connections I made with people in helping in rough times and sharing in the good times, whether it was a baby being born or a wedding or sitting with a family when someone they love died. It's the connections that I made make community. So that's my personal background, but my professional background, I've been a registered nurse working in a hospital setting for over 40 years. In the last 20 years, I was a hospital supervisor, and in those roles you needed to have critical thinking, good communication skills, you had to be able to listen and have a balance and fairness. And that's it. Thank you.
Hi, thanks for all coming, and thanks for having us here. I'm Danley Logie. I'm running for my 4th term in the House of Representatives. I live down at St. Regis. I graduated from high school in St. Regis. I got a bachelor's from the University of Montana. Currently, I'm still in the University Alumni Marching Band, which you may have seen me on TV last weekend. A little ad. I worked highway construction for 17 years. I actually worked on many of the roads here in Sanders County and in Mineral County and throughout the state. In '87, I went to work for Montana Department of Transportation, plowed snow on Lookout Pass for 28 years, or 22 years, and then 6 years I was in Superior. I have a good background in transportation, and so I've been chairman of the Transportation Committee in the House of Representatives for 2 sessions and plan to be for the 3rd session. I'm also on Fish, Wildlife, and Park Committee, and I'm on Business and Labor Committee. We deal with a lot of the insurance issues. I have cows at St. Regis, and actually to be able to get to Helena in the wintertime, I've made an arrangement, and one of your Sanders County residents leases my cows in the wintertime. So they're here. They came back to Plains yesterday and today. So I have a connection with the agriculture of Montana, and I also have some timber ground. And actually today, 2 logging truck loads of my logs came to the mill here in Thompson Falls. So I have a connection to the resource world too of Montana, and I think that's one of the things that we have a problem here in Montana is we're not able to use our resources, and that's one of the things we have to continue to work on in Helena, to be able to use these natural resources in the timber management of Montana. But I would appreciate a vote. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So the first question, Ms. Hines, if you'll answer first. Sanders County is diverse. How will you make sure the needs of all residents are being heard and addressed in Helena?
Well, they could just call me. But it's diverse, I know, though most of the population is in the 40 and older crowd. And I think I've been around to one of the senior dinners, and some of the main topics that they've said they needed help or were concerned about were the taxes and healthcare. And I would listen fairly and use good equanimity to who's gonna get the most or what there is. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. The diversity of the county, this county and Mineral County as well, and I have to include the Mineral County in that. I attend a lot of meetings. I've been to collaborative meetings in our county, in Mineral County, but also in Sanders County, dealing with the timber issues. I work with the Forest Service, both ranger districts quite a bit. Plus, I was actually on the phone this morning to the Lolo Regional Supervisor in Missoula. And I also have dealt with the Plains City Council, but I go to as many meetings as I can, and I also have my phone number available, and I have my email available. And I think from the contact I have with people and going in the stores, going to the coffee groups. A few weeks ago, I stopped at Lone Pine at 8 o'clock in the morning and had coffee with a bunch of the ranchers there. The week before, I was at 6:30, I was in Hot Springs with a coffee group, and I stop in Plains. I know when the 9 o'clock boys are there and the 3 o'clock boys, and I try to make connections there, and I try to make connections at about any meeting that I am invited to or that I can keep track of. I can't make them all, but I try to keep track of people, and then I'm very receptive to phone calls and emails.
We've got a diverse group of people in Sanders County when you look at from Heron all the way to Dixon. But we have a people that's all served by government. And it's a government of the people, by the people, and for the people that participate. If you don't participate, it's not working for you. In the legislature, people can reach us by phone, they can reach us by email, or they can come there and meet with us in person, or come and testify on bills in the legislature. It's the people that speak up and and participate in their government that get the attention. Like Denley said, I go to a lot of events. I've been involved with every sportsman organization in the county, I think, often in a leadership role. I go to senior centers for dinners sometimes, and I'm in the county fair, I'm in parades, I'm at the Huckleberry Festival. I get around, and a lot of people know that, and they come up and they'll talk to me, whether it's in the grocery store or in an official venue. If you don't speak up, you're not going to be any heard. So people, I ask you to participate, whether you think I'm going to be in favor of your bill or not. You know, if I don't ever hear your opinion, I can't ever consider it. So speak up. It's a participation event.
Thank you. And the next question, we'll start with Mr. Logie. Would you ever vote against your party on an issue? Why or why not?
Thank you. That's a question that it's an obvious answer because people can look at a voting record. My voting record is public knowledge. And just because a Republican writes a bill, that doesn't mean the bill is the right thing to do. And so I try to look at the bill for what the bill's merits are. And to me, that's what's most important. And I represent constituents. I don't represent the Republican Party strictly. So I have to look at the bill. The contents of the bill, the one little word is very important. It's more important than who wrote it and what the letter is behind their name. So yes, there are times I will vote against a bill that was written by a Republican and may look supported by Republicans, but if it's not a good bill, if it wasn't written correctly, if it doesn't do the right thing for the people, I would vote against it, yes.
There were several bills that were brought by Republicans, I believe, that, the majority of the Republicans voted for and that I did not vote for. Some were brought by Republicans, some were brought by Democrats. Like Denley said, you take a look at the bill, and basically, is it going to cause more restrictions? Is it going to take away some freedoms? Is it going to cost money? Who's going to pay for it? You look at the details of the bill, and you try to vote as to how it meets your principles. Sometimes those principles are written down. I keep a card, which I have out in the front on my desk, and it has the things that I believe in. And basically, it's more freedom and less restriction. That's how I look at bills, and I'll vote accordingly, regardless of who brings it.
Well, I've never had any experience in writing a bill or reading them, but I have been the moderator in between patients and their families who have demands and needs, and the doctors and the nurses, and the union regs, and the hospital protocol, and sometimes even the police, and it gets a little intense, and you have to keep an equanimity and fairness and balance all sides, and from what I hear, it sounds like the same in the legislature, and just keeping equanimity and going with what's fair for everybody is the best. Thank you.
Thank you. And the final question, we'll start with Mr. Fielder. What do you think of the proposal to switch to annual legislative sessions?
I kind of thought I was in an annual legislative session since it never ended, since we got out in 2021. There's seldom a day that goes by when I'm not dealing on a legislative issue for some constituent or some committee that's going on. Having our legislative session every 2 weeks is a cram. We're entitled by we're governed by our Montana Constitution that the legislature shall meet for 90 days every 2 years, within a 2-year period. So if we have an annual session, that means we'd be meeting for 45 days every year. And it's hard enough to get stuff done in a 90-day session every other year, much less try to get stuff through the legislature, which goes through the House, and then it's got to go over through the Senate, and then if it's amended, it's got to come back to the House again. I just don't see how you can get legislative bills done in a 45-day session. So if, unless we change the Constitution, that's what we'd be looking at, is 2 45-day sessions, and that'll be a real cram job.
Thank you. In the discussion, I know we had discussions in Helena about this, a lot of the legislators, and I can see the advantage of having possibly a 60-day and a 45-day dealing with budgets. It's hard to make the budget decisions even 45 days, as Representative Fielder said. We've got a lot of things going on. 45 days is tough to cover it. The structure of the session would have to be changed. We would have to be able to drop bills early, have them assigned to committees so the first day we get there we're rolling. I think we could possibly do it then if we change that structure, but that would change, like I say, take a change. I believe sometimes I was there for the one special session, and there was talk of a special session this time, and that's to cover up or to fill in some of the problems we don't foresee. They do revenue estimates that come in, and they're about 2 years. We do our budgets about 2 years ahead of time, and the revenue estimates come in kind of after the fact sometimes. And we would be able to deal with that a little better if we did it on an annual basis. But I think what would end up having, we would have a longer session on one of them for sure. One might be budget, one might be policies. But in the long run, we would be spending more of your money. And I think that's one of the things that we always have to try to watch is how much money are we spending, and would we be gaining enough to justify spending that money? And right now with the structure we have, I believe not, but maybe we'll come up with some new plans and new ideas, and if we could come up so the structure didn't spend your money, I would approve of it, but as it stands, I think we'll stick with what we have.
All right, thank you. And now we'll have closing statements. You each have 2 minutes. Oh, I'm so sorry.
Okay.
Please go ahead.
Could you repeat the question, please?
What do you think of the proposal to switch to annual legislative sessions?
Well, I've never been at one session, but what Mr. Logie said sounds pretty good. But just paying attention to the last legislative session and talking about saving taxpayer money, there was, what I could see, a lot of bills pushed through that were not constitutional, and now they're ending up going through court. So that's kind of a waste of money too, to have to redo all those bills. So maybe spending a little more time and doing it right the first time might be the answer. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we can start with closing statements. So you each have 2 minutes. Ms. Hines, if you'll go first, please.
Okay. As a closing statement, I would like to say I totally love being an advocate for all people, and it would be very rewarding and fulfilling for me to be your next representative, and it would be a privilege and an honor to take your voice to Helena. Thank you.
In closing, I'd like to say, I feel that in the years I've been in Helena, I've learned an awful lot. There's a lot that you can learn, you can keep learning, but I do think it's important to have some of that knowledge. They call it institutional knowledge. I'm not quite sure I want to fall into that institutional clause, but I have some knowledge, and I went there with some knowledge, and I try to share that, and I try to communicate with people, and I feel that I do that quite well, maybe too much at times. I take after my mother maybe on that account, but when I go into the grocery stores, I'm talking to people and listening, and I think that's one of the things that I carry well is that I do listen. Even if I talk a lot, I do listen too, and I try to relate that to the legislation that goes on. And I, like I said before, I look at the bills and look what the wording does and think about the constituents that sent me. That's why I'm there. It's a people's house. In every district in Montana, and I've talked to a lot of legislators lately, and they're seeing that there's actually more difference in all of the districts than maybe there used to be. They used to be consolidated as all a set Republican and all a set Democrat, but now we're getting more interest coming to the state from other states. And we have to represent all those people, and that's what I feel that I do is try to listen and represent everyone, and especially my constituents. Thank you. I appreciate the vote.
I'm not a rookie at this legislative role. It's a tough job in the legislature. When I first, in this legislative session, people asked me if I was having fun. Are you enjoying it? And I said, no, I haven't got to that part yet. If you can get by on about 5 hours sleep for 4 months, you'll do all right and be effective in the legislature. It's a real full-time job, and then when the session's over, it just never ends. But my experience in writing legislation that eventually gets passed, that you can present on the House floor and in committees, and get it passed and get it signed into law. My experience and effectiveness serving on committees and asking questions and cross-examining people that come up and testify, and then speaking on the House floor. It's not just about the bills you present, but when bills are presented on the House floor, speaking for them or against them, and that helps pass bills or gets bad bills killed. So that kind of experience is something that you want to have an effective representation for this part of the county. Oftentimes it's not what you know, it's who you know. My wife was a senator for 8 years, and I worked with her an awful lot in that legislative period. I've been in the legislature for 1 session, but I've gotten to know a lot of the people. I know all the statewide candidates, the governor, the attorney general, secretary of state, all those people. I know our Congress people, our senators, and our House of Representatives, and most of the administrators for department agencies and department heads. And those are the people that you got to have contact with in order to get the questions that you need answered, and in order to push your bills through them and get their input. So I ask you to vote for somebody who's going to be effective and is proven to be effective. So I ask you to please vote for Paul C. for Conservative, Fielder. Thank you.
Thank you. How about a round of applause for our state representative? And now I'm gonna invite up our candidates for Sanders County Attorney and Public Administrator, Naomi Lees and Cheryl Copperstone.
Thanks.
Good evening, thank you. So we'll start with our introductions, and Ms. Lees, if you'd like to go first, please.
I'm holding my hand here because I can't see anybody. I'm Naomi Lees, and I know a lot of people here, and I think a lot of people here know me, but for the people that don't, I have some pamphlets out front that have all of my, my education and about me and my background, so I don't want to, I feel like I keep repeating this with all the people that I talk to, but I think some of the information that's not on that is, before I became county attorney, I was in private practice for about 20 years. I had my own law office and I practiced a variety of legal areas. And I think a lot of the practice areas that I did before I became county attorney has helped me in this job. One of the big things that I believe has helped me in this job for the first 4 years was when I worked for the public defender. It was, I think that job representing defendants provided a pretty good boilerplate for me in the prosecution area. It allowed me to become familiar with the criminal process, and if I wouldn't have had that background, I think it would be a lot more difficult to do what I've done for the last 4 years. The civil stuff that I did a lot of real estate, a lot of corporations, a lot of contracts, guardianships and conservatorships. That has definitely helped me in the public administrator side of the job, which has greatly increased. I've ended up having to do quite a bit of that work. So I think that background has helped me with this job. Thank you.
Hi, the light is really bad. I'm Cheryl Copperstone. I'm here as your write-in candidate for County Attorney, Public Administrator. I didn't grow up in Montana. I picked Montana. I have prosecuted for approximately 3 years. I ran my own practice where at times I was supervising up to 10 employees. I had to work within a budget and have the experience, did probate work, which is what the public administration basically is, it's probate conservatorships. I think that you need a change in Sanders County, and I think I can bring that change.
Thank you. And Ms. Copperstone, you'll answer the question first. Besides prosecuting cases, what is your role in representing county government?
When you say prosecuting cases, you're talking the criminal section. There's also the public administrator section where you're doing not only the conservatorships, guardianships, you also have your cases that are DI cases, that are mental health cases. There's juvenile cases with delinquency and dependency cases. And you also are representing or advising the commissioners on law for their use also, and representing the county.
Andy, could you repeat the question, please?
Besides prosecuting cases, what is your role in representing county government?
Thank you. So besides prosecuting criminal cases, the county attorney is responsible for providing legal counsel to the county commissioners in all of the political subdivisions, which would be, for example, the fire board or the sewer board, or sometimes the park boards, the fair board. And so our role is to provide them with legal counsel, and there's a lot of
caveats to that, some that I won't, that are beyond the scope of the question. But the other jobs that we have are handling numerous other cases. For example, child abuse and neglect cases. Sanders County has seen a substantial increase in child abuse and neglect cases. Right now we have about 22 cases, and I think one of the things that people don't realize is these cases go on for years. We have cases right now with kids who have been in the system since before I became county attorney, and they're still in the system. So these cases go on, and we have to have annual hearings, and there's a lot of time constraints and a lot of very particular details that we have to pay attention to in those cases. We also do involuntary mental health commitments. We just had one this last week. They are also very time detailed. They're very specific time detailed, and they're a lot of work. That I would not be able to do those cases without my legal assistants, who we have all of the contacts, we have all of the forms set up, but our various partners in the communities, we wouldn't be able to do those cases without the help of the hospital and the state hospital and the deputies involved in transporting. Thank you.
And Ms. Lisa, if you'll answer this next one first, please. Can you please briefly tell us about the different types of case law experience you have? What types of cases?
Do you mean what types of cases I've prosecuted, or, okay. So in the county attorney's office, we prosecute felonies and misdemeanors. The misdemeanors are handled in justice court, and most of those cases are traffic offenses, and maybe first and second DUIs, and we get, once in a while, we get some other criminal mischief or other misdemeanor cases. In the district court, we prosecute felonies of all of the felonies. I think probably one of the most significant areas that we prosecute are domestic violence. There's been a substantial increase in domestic violence in Sanders County. That's one of the things we see in justice court. The first two offenses are misdemeanors, and then they become felonies. But not just partner assaults, also strangulation. Strangulation became an offense in Montana in 2017, and we have prosecuted that extensively. I'm actually, and so are other people, when I tell them, they're shocked how many times I have to charge strangulation, and so we are working through those cases. They're very difficult cases. And we also prosecute drug cases, and we actually have a lot of probation revocation cases now. Through COVID, it was a nightmare, and we have seen a lot of people come back with probation revocations. The Department of Corrections is kicking them loose early, and we're seeing them back, unfortunately. So we have to revoke them and go back and resentence them.
Well, I think that she probably answered all the questions as far as what kind of cases they handled. I think that the DUIs, I've tried numerous DUIs, in excess of 20 DUIs. I've actually gone to trial and prosecuted. I was up in Lincoln County prosecuting, and I prosecuted over 130 DUIs that did not go to trial, in addition to DUIs in both justice court and in district court when they're at the felony level, when they're 4 or more. And I've seen cases where there's actually 11. The partner family member assaults, which is the domestic violence, the order of protection violations. I've prosecuted strangulations, drug cases, animal cruelty. I think she mentioned all of them, or as many as she had done all that also. I don't know what else to say in addition to in Lincoln County, I did do the DN cases, the neglect cases, but that's part of the job.
Do you feel that DUI laws are strict enough, and how might they be changed? Ms. Copperstone?
Are they strict enough? It depends if they're prosecuted as a DUI. If they're prosecuted as a DUI, then they are strict enough because we have what's called a stacking issue with them. So the first DUI, you have, the penalties get worse as the time goes by. So if they're pled down to, for example, a careless driving, then they don't get the stacking effect, so you don't get the punitive punishment that keeps getting worse and worse. The big issue is when they're pled down, they haven't learned their lesson. A careless driving is $85. With the DUI, you have to go to the class, you get the fine, and it affects your insurance. Your driver's license is suspended for a time unless you get a provisional license if the judge recommends you to get one. And so you have to have them prosecuted as a DUI and not pled down all the time, because everyone can make a mistake once. But if you're getting to the second, third, and successful DUIs, the person has an issue and needs to be punished more in reality. Sorry, could you repeat
Yeah,
the
go
question
ahead.
again?
Do you feel DUI laws are strict enough, and how might they be changed?
Okay, so yes, I do believe they just changed in 2021, the legislature revamped all the penalty statutes. And it's still a learning curve. Unfortunately, they don't make it easy on us. It's all of the penalties are all over the statute book, but they are strict enough. I think that, and by the way, DUIs aren't pled down. The only time they're pled down is if we don't have a very good case and we need to negotiate it. And that it all has to do with the evidence. And so if that's the case, we might negotiate something different, but for the most part, the felony DUIs, they're pleading to a felony DUI. And one of the problems that we have is the penalty is definitely sufficient, but I've just noticed this in the last few months. The Department of Corrections is releasing these defendants way sooner than they should be released. They're not even having to serve their full sentence. They're out on conditional release almost as soon as they're done treatment, even on a felony DUI. So I think the one thing that we need to change is they shouldn't be allowed out in the community, especially at the felony level. I think that penalty, the Department of Corrections needs to keep their hooks in them, and we need to place on them very strict restrictions at that time once they've completed their treatment, because right now it's just not happening, and we're seeing them on revocations and we're basically resentencing them.
Thank you. And now, we have 2 minutes for closing remarks. Ms. Lees, if you want to go first.
On my closing remarks, I would like to talk about some of the things that I've accomplished since I started the county attorney job. One of the things that I'm really tried to work hard doing, it's been very difficult because I don't have the time, but I've worked with the Sanders County Coalition for Families to put together the Sanders County Domestic Violence Response Team, and we've been meeting periodically. We kind of slacked off during COVID, but we have in the last 8 months been meeting regularly, and this group is made up of my office, the Coalition for Family, deputies, someone from the high school. We try to get an officer from all of the cities and as well as the Sheriff's Department to meet and put together a collaborative response to domestic violence. And we'll be putting something in the paper about that in the next couple of weeks, kind of trying to let the community know about all of the hard work that everybody's done. One of the other things that I started as county attorney is I started the secure warrant software program. I've explained this to some of the people running for sheriff. It's a software program that allows us to work through search warrants more efficiently, more quickly, and more effectively. When I first became county attorney, the officers were coming to my office when we needed a search warrant, we were typing it up, they were driving to Polson, finding a judge to sign it, and now we have the secure warrant software where we can get it done in 20 minutes. And the judges are hooked into this software also, and it's been very helpful in prosecuting drug cases.
Guys, I can bring you an office that has honesty, integrity. I can bring you an office that has a working relationship with law enforcement. I think that's crucial to be able to do the job. I don't think the job can be done without a working relationship with law enforcement. I bring experience with more trial experience. I think when defense attorneys know that you're willing and able and capable to go to trial, they're more willing to negotiate a reasonable plea agreement rather than an unreasonable plea agreement. And I'm asking you respectfully for your write-in vote for Sanders County Attorney. Thank you.
All right, thank you to our county attorney candidates. Our next race is Sanders County Coroner. I'd like to invite Pat Barber up here. Martin Spring is also listed on the ballot, but he informed me last week that he's no longer pursuing the office because he wishes to stay with the Sanders County Sheriff's Office. Hi, Pat. You have 2 minutes for an introduction.
Hello there. Here I am, all by myself, but Annie said she would be here as my support. So thank you for having this, and thank you for letting me come up here and talk. And so when I started this campaign process with the primaries, I had two ideas that were quickly proven wrong. And one was that nobody really cares what the coroner's office does. And two, nobody really wants to talk to the coroner. I have learned that I'm incorrect on both of those. So I look forward to this, and I look forward to talking with you afterwards. So now for my quick introduction. I'm Pat Barber. I am your current Sanders County Coroner. In November of last year, the coroner's office was separated from the sheriff's department, made its own entity, and I was appointed to that position. Now I am running for re-election. There's no word for when you're appointed, running for election. So just re-election into that office. So some background on me. I am a widower. I have 3 kids, and I have 3 of the absolute best grandkids in the world. I come from, I have a 20-year career in the Coast Guard as a helicopter hoist operator. I retired from that in 2009. After that, I got into the civilian aspect of rotary wing aircraft and worked on a search and rescue air ambulance, it's the first one in the United States, in the Gulf of Mexico. And I got a lot of EMS experience and a broad range of medical experience through that process. After that, started working on a ground ambulance, worked there for quite a while, worked in the cardiac division of the hospital, and I worked in the ER. So I kind of found my niche in EMS and in medicine lines like that. Then I found myself over here in Montana. I chose to move here and saw an ad in the paper for a deputy coroner, and I thought, hey, a guy with my experience, with a lot of history of being with people who have died, responding to people to death, and the medical aspect, I thought it might be a good fit. It would be a good idea for me to get a part of the county and get to know people. So here I am. Look forward to these questions.
Excellent.
I'm just going to
Okay, that's fine. Your first question is, can you tell us what a typical day is like as coroner?
No, I cannot tell you what a typical, because there is no typical day. So I'll tell you what the coroner's office is responsible for, and then we'll go from there. So by law, Montana state law, the coroner's office is to determine the cause and manner of death, right? So we have to investigate every death that is not in the presence of medical personnel and a couple other aspects of that. But a typical it's hard to talk about all this because we're talking about death. But so somebody dies at home, you have an elderly person that's what we would consider a natural death. So we would show up. This is where the compassion and the experience kind of plays in. I'm coming face to face with somebody who just lost their loved one, and it's very possibly the worst day of their life. So I've been there several times, and I can relate to that. So we have to determine by law the cause of death. We have to determine what the mechanism or event that took place to cause this person's life to end. And so by that, we're studying the medical history, we're studying the scene, there's a little bit of investigation that goes on, and then we have to determine the manner. And the manner falls in several small categories, and we determine that. But each death is different. The last 3 weeks in the county have been all different, and so there's no average day.
Thank you, Pat. How do you ensure proper collection and storage of evidence in potential criminal cases?
Very good. Yeah, so we do collect evidence. So it's a joint effort with the Sheriff's Department. If it's a crime, the law enforcement. Now, generally we're working with the Sheriff's Department, but any law enforcement. If it is a crime, a criminal event, they're going to handle that evidence collection. If it's not, say for example, it's a suicide, there's definitely evidence that needs to be collected. And those are collected through normal, standard procedures. I have studied and took classes on evidence and scene processing. I just completed a class from University of North Dakota, which was a 9-month class, and death investigation. So a lot of that was collecting evidence. So we have a policy. Sanders County Coroner's Office has a policy and procedure manual, and in there it lists proper procedures, and we have the tools and the experience to do that, and it's a joint effort. The law enforcement help us do it right, and it's important that that kind of stuff is done right.
Thanks. And your last question, what changes have you made in the office, and do you have any plans for future changes?
All right, so when I took over, it was basically creating a new office from scratch, so everything was changed. So the first thing I did was create a policy and procedures manual. That's a guide to make sure everything is done in accordance with standard practices and in accordance with the Montana Code laws. Another thing I started doing was training. I feel that the coroner's office is, in general, the Sanders County has been kind of underserved in that, just due to the fact that people didn't have the training, the knowledge of what to look for and how to correctly determine the cause and manner of death. So I instituted training. And a lot of that came with me. So I immersed myself in a lot of training. I'm constantly in training, and I just got my acceptance letter for the American Board of Medical Legal Death Investigators. So that's the national overseeing body for coroners and medical examiners. Another change that we did is we've got 2 new vehicles. So we can respond quicker to the scene. We can respond, we spend less time at the scene, and it gives us some flexibility. Flexibility like we carry U.S. flags in the coroner's right now. So if we have a deceased person that was a military veteran or law enforcement, we can transport that person under the colors. That's providing dignity and respect and honor, which I think is a huge thing that needs to be applied as we came through.
Thanks. And any closing remarks you'd like to say?
Sure. One of your questions in the paper was, what's the biggest challenge that I foresee in the coroner's office? And I couldn't answer that correctly in 100 questions, or 100 words for the answer. So I just want to address that a little bit. Sanders County is growing. Everybody sees that. If you just have to turn on to Highway 200, you notice that you have to wait a little bit longer because the traffic is a lot more. So that equals a bigger workload on us that we've never seen before. Right now, we have a 25% increase today, a 25% increase of deaths than last year. And then last year we had 4 suicides. This year so far we've had 6. So that's a huge workload on a small office. So I'm foreseeing that. Like I said, the training was a big part in making sure that we can handle that increase and transport things. So that's another part. But mainly, I am enjoyed the opportunity to serve you, to serve the families. I consider it a privilege to be there. It's a time of someone's need. I have the experience, I've been there. And what I end up doing is literally writing the last chapter of somebody's life. Literally, I work in our documentations. And I think that's important. Everybody needs the respect and the dignity and the truth. The truth needs to be told. And I have found that the families, whether the truth is good, bad, or ugly, they are very grateful that the coroner's office has taken the time to look into their death and figure out exactly what happened and be able to tell them that. And that's a part of the last chapter of somebody's life. So I appreciate your support. Through the community, I have gotten great support. I'm astounded by that. The commissioners have been very supportive in all the growth and the change that the coroner's office has had, and thank you very much.
And the final candidates that we'll hear from tonight are candidates for Sanders County Sheriff. We have Corey Wheeldon. Has anybody seen him tonight? He said he was going to have to work. So Roy Scott and Sean Fielders, you'll come up. Lanny Hensley is the other writing candidate, and he called me earlier and said that he had to work tonight as well. All right, we will start with introductions, and Mr. Fielders, if you'll go first, please.
Lights aren't quite as bright as they were last time. Hello folks, I'm Sean Fielders, and obviously I'm running for Sanders County Sheriff. 2 minutes isn't a lot of time to put background in, but I come from 27 years of law enforcement, all done within a sheriff's office. My original intent was to retire in this wonderful community. That's changed a little bit. My wife and I love this area, and I felt that with my experience in law enforcement, I had a lot to bring to it. I'm going to give you a quick rundown. I started as a reserve in the sheriff's office. That was my kickoff. Shortly, I went full-time, and I've had a great career. I've got to do so many different things within the sheriff's office, everywhere from forest patrol, regular patrols. I managed 3 law enforcement contracts with unincorporated cities when I got promoted into a sergeant's position. I was one of the people who couldn't keep my hand down when they had a new program coming up or whatnot, so I was in search and rescue. I did a lot of search and rescue. I was a recovery diver. I was actually a deputy medical examiner. So as you can tell, I just couldn't say no to a lot of different things. But I think what that gave me after 27 years is a very well-rounded experience that I can give back to this community. I feel that I owe that to the community, and I'm really looking forward to passing that along. And so I'll be looking for your vote.
Hello, I'm Roy Scott. I'm running for Sanders County Sheriff. I've been in and out of here since 1982. I came back permanently in 2014. Whenever I came back, I got on the search and rescue pretty much immediately whenever I got back. And then I got on as a reserve deputy with the Sheriff's Office. And then while I was reserving, I got on with the detention facility, started working there. And while I was working detention, I put in for Thomas Falls City Police Officer, and I got the position, so I started hitting it pretty hard. They sent me to the academy, and while I was at the academy, I was offered a full-time position with the Sheriff's Office on patrol, so I came back, went back to work for them full-time, and hit it pretty hard for a couple of years, and then didn't really like the direction that the Sheriff's Office is going, so I decided to leave, go back to the police department, continue serving Thompson Falls. I want to continue serving Sanders County and Thompson Falls. This has always been my home, and I want to continue to keep it safe, keep the bad element out of here. Like Mr. Barber said, we have a huge influx of people moving in here. Some of them are good, some of them are really good people, and then we also have some bad ones moving in too. And I want to help keep them bad ones from doing any harm to us. Thank you.
And Mr. Scott, if you'll answer first for the first question, why do you want to be sheriff?
Well, at first I really didn't want to be sheriff, But, like I said before, whenever I was working for the sheriff's office, there were some things that I saw that just didn't set right with me, and that's why I left the sheriff's office. And, whenever I saw the election coming up, I thought about it. Quite a few people had come to me and mentioned that, they thought that I'd do a pretty good job at it. I believe in being honest. I believe in, I believe that the integrity's been out of the office for a long time. I wanna see that come back. I wanna see people getting treated properly. I want the public to be served like they should be served. That hasn't happened for a long time. I wanna bring some more training to the office. We need more training here. Last year there was a $3,400 surplus in the training budget, and that shouldn't be there. I can see a $3,400 deficit, and we can, push some numbers around to cover that, but, training is really important, and that's why I wanna be sheriff. I wanna serve you people. I'm not doing this for me, I'm doing it for you. Thank you.
It's always a tough question. Like I said originally, it wasn't something that I dreamed of all my life to become sheriff. I do agree with Roy. I mean, we, as a sheriff, if I became sheriff, the sheriff's office works for the people. And that's one of the reasons I spent my whole career in the sheriff's office. Honestly believe that the power that the sheriff wields isn't something to be taken lightly. I believe the experience I've gotten over the years, I take it even more serious than ever. I see some deficiencies in the sheriff's office now. I think there's a lack of accountability in a lot of different ways. But I don't think I think it's a leadership thing. I think our deputies are very, very capable, but I think I can bring that leadership to them. I've run much larger scenarios. One of the things I retired in, I was a SWAT team commander. I'm not advocating SWAT for Sanders County by any means. But when you have a 40-man SWAT team with type A personalities, it does teach you a little bit about manipulating and managing hardcore people, type A personalities. I think I can do that. Matter of fact, I know I can. I want to be sure for the people here. I want my son, if he decides to raise a family in this community, and anybody else's children, to have that community what it is now, and actually maybe a little bit before some of this stuff started creeping into the county. I want this to be a wonderful place to live. I want everybody to be treated fairly, evenly, no matter what your political leanings or what your leanings are at all. In 27 years, I don't recall ever asking somebody what their political views were on anything. We serve everybody. I want to bring that back to the county, and I have the capabilities of doing it.
Thank you. The second question, what is your plan to get a handle on the dangerous drugs in Sanders County? Mr. Fielders?
Number one problem everybody talks to me about is reoccurring, and I see it. That's one of the reasons why I decided to run for sure. The dangerous drugs were on major drug quarters, meaning the state highways, going right through the middle of the county, all the way through the middle of the county. So my goal is I'm going to start what's called targeted law enforcement. There's not a single town out here that anybody lives in that town, you can go and say, who's selling the drugs? And I can guarantee you, everybody knows what I'm talking about. They go, that house down there on the corner, they get about 50 cars in the night, they stay 5 minutes or less. Well, that's pretty much a place to target. Now, we don't want to violate anybody's constitutional rights. I'm going to be very stickler on that. I'm running as a constitutional sheriff. However, we're also not stupid. We know what the problem with children are, and we can start working and targeting those. The idea is to make it so difficult for drug dealers to do business in this county, they move on. Hate to say it, they'll probably move out of the county and become somebody else's problem, but I'm not asking to be sheriff of somebody else's county. I want to keep this county safe. And that's the way we got to do it. We got to go after the dealers, and we got to make it so miserable, working with the county attorney and making sure that when we do catch these guys, they're prosecuted to the full extent of the law. I have zero tolerance for illegal drugs, period. You just won't accept that. With illegal drugs, we end up with more property crimes. Dopers don't have jobs as a normal thing. They steal stuff to pay for their dope. So what happens? You have drug usage, property crimes go up, and a lot of the person-to-person crimes because it alters your state of mind. So to me, it's the ultimate evil, and I plan on going after it hard.
I agree with a lot that Mr. Fielder said. When it comes to illegal drugs, the only difference is I know who they are. I've been chasing them ever since I got on with local law enforcement. I know who the people are in Hot Springs on the west end of the county. We did have quite a problem here in Thompson Falls. I'm not going to say that we don't have a problem. We do. They've quieted down quite a bit. When I worked for the sheriff's office, like Mr. Fielder said, you know, put them on the run. I had a bunch on the run. A lot of them left the county, some of them left the state. But I came back to the city, and guess what? They came back to the county because nothing else had been done about it. I heard somebody say the other day that we didn't have a problem with drugs in Sanders County. We had an abuse problem, and I disagree with that. We definitely have an addiction problem. We have an abuse problem. We do have a drug problem. And someone also said that there's no manufacturing going on here, which I beg to differ because I got 2 meth labs last year. I'm sure some of you read it in the paper. There are some things going on out in the county right now. I've got people contacting me constantly. They're telling me about the problem children in all the different cities that we have. Only problem is right now, I can't do anything about that. I'm stuck right here in Thompson Falls. I do reach out, I work with the Northwest Drug Task Force. I plan to continue to work with them. I also work with Kootenai County, Idaho State Police, Montana Highway Patrol, their interdiction team, Mineral County. I work with all of our surrounding counties, Idaho and Montana. Plan to continue to do that, and I'm a member of the Montana Narcotics Officers Association, and I plan to continue with that too. We need to get our deputies trained up on looking for drugs. I mean, look and know what they're looking at. We have so many of them right now. I had a case a week ago, 2 weeks ago, something like that, that had a deputy standing there and he didn't really know what was going on, and I made a drug case out of it. We need to get this thing cleaned up. Thank you.
Will you enforce the public nuisance law to help clean up our county? Why or why not? Mr. Scott?
Well, it depends on the situation, obviously. If it's a public nuisance and we have complaints about it, we gotta do something about it. We don't have to be forceful about it, and as long as nobody's rights get violated, then I don't see why we can't enforce it.
That's kind of catch-all, the public nuisance law, and we probably always, sometimes you have neighbors that, it's like, how come they got 30 junk cars in their yard and that kind of thing. I think one of the roles as sheriff is, yes, we want to enforce those laws, but also I think part of that is to work with the community. Personally, I've had to deal with many of those type of laws throughout my career, and I found probably about 50% of the time, I can go and talk to those people and say, look, you're in violation of these laws. And give them a chance to take care of that issue. Talk with both sides. And tell the folks that are making the complaint or whatnot, that's what you're gonna try first. You always start, it's like fixing a car, you start with a little stuff first. But if they just flat out refuse, then the laws are there for a purpose. Nobody wants, like I said, junkyards in your, down the street or next door. And there's so many other different things too. But I wouldn't force them, but I would also try to deal with them and come up with a conclusion before we have to put it into the legal system. Because I don't think that's always the very first thing to do. But yes, if it is a law, and again, I agree with Roy, if it's not taking away anybody's constitutional rights, then it's something we have to go after.
Thank you. Do you think Sanders County schools should have resource officers, and if so, how would you facilitate that program? Mr. Fielders?
I think resource officers is a great idea. I remember when the DARE program first came into the areas, we loved it. DARE officers, they were resource officers. But unfortunately, most of those were on federal grants. There was no strings attached to it. The only string was they paid for the deputy for a certain amount of time. But then money ran out. And so that was on the county in order to refund that. Well, as you all know, we don't have as many deputies as we'd like to have already. And believe me, if we could afford another one, we'd get another one. If I can find a way, absolutely. Yeah, I would love to have a resource officer. But if I can't do that, I want my deputies becoming those resource officers. There's no reason why in a day when there's not something going on or they're not having to write a report, why aren't they going down to the school, just making contact, walking through? They're gonna sit in your car, do a report. Why isn't he out in the parking lot? There's a lot of different things we can do to augment that. If we can't afford to get an actual resource officer, then let's get our deputies involved with the schools. And I'd like to see the local police departments do the same thing. We're all working together. Most of the schools are within cities. And there's no reason why we can't work together that, be part of that as a group of law enforcement. So the question is, yes, I would love to get a resource officer if I could afford to do that. But we have limited supplies on cash. But I think there's a lot of things we can do to darn near have that resource officer.
And again, I agree with a lot that Mr. Fielder said. Whenever I was on patrol at the sheriff's office, everywhere I was, if I wasn't busy, I stopped into schools. Doesn't hurt to say hi to the teachers, let the kids see you, do a walkthrough, get familiar with the school. There's a lot of deputies we have right now that probably don't have any idea how the layout in a lot of these schools are. With me being with Thompson Falls Police Department, I spend a lot of time at our schools. We lost our school resource officer. Wasn't no fault of ours. I try to spend as much time as I can there. For the games, we have all kinds of functions. Pop into the volleyball games, we usually don't have a whole lot of problems there. But the kids like seeing us, and they like interacting with us. We need to keep that in our small communities. We're not seeing what they're seeing in some of the bigger cities where, you know, the kids absolutely can't stand cops. Around here, I mean, we need to keep the rapport with the children. I'd like to see a way that we could get SROs in all the schools. We're probably not going to, not even in the ones that we have municipalities, but until then, we need the deputies to be stopping in there and interacting with these children. Thank you.
And now you'll each have 2 minutes for closing remarks. Mr. Scott?
Most of you people that have come to these things have probably noticed I don't have a whole lot to say. I just say what I got to say and then I'm done. I would really appreciate everybody's vote here. I know some of you support me, some of you don't. This has been, it's been a heck of a campaign. I'm sure Mr. Fielder's can agree. Looking forward to the 5 more weeks and this is done. I never really wanted to do this, and now that I've done it, if elected, and I have the honor of being your people's sheriff, I'll do it again, obviously, if elected the first time. If not, probably not, because this really takes a toll on you. I know that the job's not gonna be easy. I've been asked questions throughout this whole thing. You know, what kind of administrative experience do you have? Well, not a whole lot. I mean, but our current sheriff didn't either whenever he took over. But I picked a man to back me and to be my number 2. And that man has the experience. And that man is like a brother to me. And I will lean on him as he will lean on me on some things that he's not familiar with the area and stuff. But he has moved here and he has seen the same thing that I have seen. He knows that we're having a problem here in this county and we need to get it fixed. I just appreciate y'all's vote. Thank you very much.
Well, there's a lot of agreeing going on up here. I know I don't like politics, and I know it much better now. I don't like politics. But I believe the position that I'm asking for your support in is worth it. It's been trying. Never thought small town politics would get this way. But I'd like to take a little bit of this closing statement, maybe put a couple of rumors to rest. And one, I'm not a Portland liberal, by the way. My career was in Oregon, but a very conservative county. And the other thing too, I've heard a rumor, and I just want to dispel that completely. People are saying that I'm going to fire all the deputies and hire my cronies from Oregon. Well, for one thing, if they're going to leave a job that pays almost 3 times as much and move to an area where they can't even afford to buy a house, I wouldn't hire them because they're idiots. So that's not going to happen. The deputies all start with a clean slate. I think they all have the tools and the capabilities to be fine deputies. I think a little guidance. My undersheriff is going to come from inside the sheriff's office. I've already made my pick. Jerry Johnson's going to be my undersheriff. He has a wealth of experience and background and knowledge within the sheriff's office, so I'm really looking forward to working with him on a future road forward. I need to dispel that. I'm getting kind of tired of hearing about it, so open forum, you all heard it. I asked for your vote because I think I got a lot to give y'all, and I will do my darndest to make sure I don't let anybody down if I'm given that opportunity. Thank you.
Well, as I said, we will be back here tomorrow night to hear from the rest of our candidates, the Justice of the Peace, Clerk and Recorder, Treasurer, Superintendent of Schools, and our 4 Commissioner candidates. So thank you everyone so much for your thoughts and professionalism tonight. Again, I invite you to stick around and chat with the candidates, take a look at their pamphlets and ask them any other questions you might have. So thank you everyone, have a great night and drive safe.